Alright friends, so as you noticed, I did not have a Sunday sum up last week. And that's because my reading was going so well. It was going so well that I ended up not hitting a slump, just slowing down a little bit. Because I'm currently in the middle of 3 books. I'm in the middle of The Mysteries of Udolpho, more than the middle of that one. I am in Madship, about 150 pages into that 850 book. And then, how far am I into the Obelisk Gate? I'm not exactly sure, but I'm reading the Obelisk Gate. And the only book that I'm making really good progress on is 12 Years a Slave, which is the audiobook I'm listening to. And, you know, it's not a very long audiobook, so what does that say? School started this week. I have been struggling with motivation to do anything, to be honest. I think part of me is like, oh, summer's over. And at first I was really motivated and gung-ho. And then after the first day of school, which was a great first day, don't get me wrong. After the first day of school, I just kind of slumped. And that says a lot about my energy level lately, and that's something I'm trying to work on. I did go to the gym for the first time this past week in a while. It's been a long while. I do sometimes workouts at home, but I really have gotten into a slump in a lot of ways over the summer, actually. So one of my favorite workouts is spin, and I actually like to put together my own little spin compilations, like spin in the 80s, spin in the 90s, and then I actually have a workout for each song, and I pick songs that make the workout last anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes. And I was doing that when we had a chance before COVID with my mom and my aunt, which was a lot of fun, and they like that I pushed them to do more than they would normally do maybe at the gym. And I just love spin. So the gym got these new spin bikes, and it was fun to go in, put on one of my spin programs, and the 3 of us worked our asses off. And it was so hard. It was so hard because it was just, it's been a while. So I'm slowly working on fixing some of the things that I need to fix to get my energy level up, my eating habits, my exercise habits. Once I started school again back in the spring, I kind of let everything else fall out of place. Got straight A's though. So anyways, this is a random update because I'm at this point where I'm not going to be putting up a Sunday sum up this week. I'll be putting one up next week when you'll be seeing this. And I just kind of wanted to say what was going on in my life because I don't really have anything to tell you book-wise because I'm just kind of slowly plodding along. So it is the 30th of September. Yesterday on the 29th, I actually finished my 10th book of the month. So September's looking pretty good. And I think I'm gonna be able to get an 11th book done today. So hopefully there's a book coming after this. If there's not, then I didn't get 11 books in. But I'm so close. Anyways, I finished 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup. I actually listened to this one on an audiobook, and the audiobook was really good. It was narrated by Louis Gossett Jr., who is an actor I've seen in An Officer and a Gentleman and a few other movies, if I remember correctly. And I really thought he did a good job. I actually had to slow the audiobook down a little bit though, because there were certain times with the tone of his voice, and maybe because I'm getting old and my hearing is bad, I needed it to be a little slower. Aside from that, I really liked his narration and I thought it added a lot to the story. This is a nonfiction first-person account of Solomon Northup, who was kidnapped like in 1841. He was a free man in New York. He was lured to Washington, D.C. because he was hoping he could make some money pretty quickly, easily for his family. Him and his wife had 3 children. And so he was like, oh good, I need some quick money. He goes to Washington, D.C. and he gets kidnapped. And then he spends 12 years in bondage. And this is the story of his experience. And I honestly am having a really hard time rating this because it's the kind of book where it's his experience. It's not necessarily about the writing. It's about hearing this man's experience. And so if I were to give a rating based off what we normally rate things for, I'd probably say a 4.25. I still really ended up enjoying this, even though there are elements to it that were at moments a little tedious for some people. I didn't find them that tedious. Like some people were saying, like when he explains in depth about certain activities like harvesting cotton and things like that, they were not very interested in that. They didn't find it to enhance the story, but I actually felt like it really did, especially since those explanations really gave you an idea of like a day in the life of Solomon Northup while he was in Louisiana in bondage. The way that Louis Gossett Jr. narrated this, you could feel his emotion reading this story about Solomon Northup, and you could see how it affected him just by his tone. That made me choke up quite a few times. And it's a hard story. The practice of slavery in general was incredibly unjust. Solomon Northup's experience being raised a free man and then being forced into bondage, it was heartbreaking. And of course he tells a story about a lot of the other people that he sees around him every day, people he creates relationships with while he's down in Louisiana. And so you're learning about these people that are, it's devastating. It's devastating. And going forward, I will look to read other first-person experiences like this. I forgot to tell you about how 12 Years a Slave fulfills the Magical Readathon and the Not Safe for Workathon. So for the Magical Readathon, I have made it through the third portion of the Novice Path, which is the Mists of Solitude, and that was to read a standalone, which 12 Years a Slave absolutely is. So as far as Not Safe for Workathon, this continues my scene by adding an impact. And for this was a powerful or intimidating book, and this was definitely a very powerful book. And also, before I forget, I want to do a little mini haul because I've got some books recently that I just couldn't help myself with. When I was visiting, as you saw, a little camping trip that I went down to California for, my friend Magda got me I Hate Fairyland, which I'm really excited about this graphic novel because I've been really curious about it. It's very gory and it's supposed to be really crazy. But it sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm kind of exploring graphic novels a little bit, and this is one that I've been interested in checking out. So I'm excited to find out how I feel about this. And Scotty Young is the author, and I'm guessing also the illustrator. So this is the first book, and I don't know when I'll get to it, but I'm hoping I'll get to it soon. So thank you so much, Magda, for this. I am so excited that you're unhauling it so that I could get it. I have not been able to pick up this buddy read, Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, and I had it on hold at the library through ebook, and I just wasn't enjoying reading it that way, especially since it's such a large book. I didn't want to listen to this one on audiobook. Maybe it's great on audiobook, but I didn't want to listen to it on audiobook, and I just kind of really wanted the physical book. Based off what I read so far in this, I have a feeling I'm gonna really like it, so I'm like, nah, I just want the book. I want the book. So I bought the book because I'm no longer on a book buying ban, so I'm not gonna go crazy, but I can buy books if I want to. So I did. I had some glasses trouble where my glasses kind of fell apart and I had to go to Costco emergency glass fixing because at the time I didn't have a backup pair of glasses. I have since remedied that problem. My glasses broke. I'm running around trying to get things accomplished, can't see, and I went to Costco to get these fixed. And while I was there, I couldn't help myself. I went and looked at the book section and I got 2 books. So the first one I saw that I was really excited about is The Harlem Shuffle by Colston Whitehead. I actually have not read Colston Whitehead's other books. There's The Nickel Boys and The Underground Railroad. And both of those I've actually been really nervous to read because I've heard how difficult they are and I'm afraid they're gonna destroy me. And I probably will read them at some point, but those ones I've been a little nervous to read. Ever since I heard like one person give a synopsis of this, I was like, oh, that sounds like my kind of book. It's fairly new, so I keep hearing a few people talk about it, and I'm like, no, this is the book for me. So when I saw it at Costco, I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm getting it because I'm not on a book buying ban anymore. This is about this young man named Carney. He's an upstanding man, has a family, doing all the right things, but nobody knows that he comes from a line of uptown hoods and crooks. And occasionally he gets a little bit of help from his cousins, where they kind of drop something off that could be hot. He doesn't know. He doesn't ask questions, and he knows somebody who also is willing to buy that item and won't ask questions either. Occasionally he does this a little bit here and there for money, but then at some point he gets into this crew, and they are going to be doing this heist. I don't know what happens in the heist, but I know that he gets more entrenched in this world of crime. And so he's kind of fighting with this side of himself that is the upstanding citizen and the side of himself that is becoming this criminal. It says, Harlem Shuffle's ingenious story plays out in a beautifully recreated New York City of the early 1960s. I like that time period. It's not a time period that I read about too much in books. I'm really excited about that. And then it says, it's a family saga masquerading as a crime novel. Yeah, I like that. And it says, and a hilarious morality play. That speaks to me. So I'm really excited about this. I can't wait to read this. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it'll happen because I have it now. And then finally, another book that I saw that's a recent release. And I know this seems like a strange pick, but for my 12 Days of Christmas Carol Advent Calendar Challenge, I've figured out what books are possibilities so far. This happens to be one of the possibilities that I may end up picking. You know, as my advent calendar goes, I may not pick it. But I thought this would be a fun buy anyways, because I think that Mom and I would have fun reading it. And I couldn't help myself. It's The Santa Suit by Mary Kay Andrews. She's written a lot of other fun, cutesy romance types. I love Christmas books. I don't have very many Christmas books, and so I thought this would be fun, and I could very well be reading this one in December anyways. I want a few fun Christmas books on hand, so come winter time we have something that puts us in the spirit. And this isn't a very big book, so I mean, like, you know, read this one evening with some hot cocoa or some scotch next to the fire and when it's raining outside, and then you're automatically in the mood for Christmas. So I thought that would be a fun purchase. I may need to read it anyways. So yeah, just no willpower. What can I say? And a banana milkshake. This is what they're famous for, their falafels. And I got a falafel salad. Okay, so it is October 1st, and it just so happens that last night I finished The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This was my 11th book of September. Pretty darn good. It feels good to have gotten back into more of the reading mode I was in before. And I know that means that I didn't quite do as many videos because I wasn't editing quite as much, but I really enjoyed my reading month. I had some amazing books that I read in September. And so I was really excited to finish The Obelisk Gate. This was originally a buddy read with Liz from For Booking Out Loud, but I am so behind. She finished this earlier in the month of September, and then it just has taken me a long time to get to it. And I will say that I gave the first book, the 5th season, 5 stars. This one, I'm really thinking 4.25 because I enjoyed it a lot. There were so many moments of this that I cried, and I feel very strongly for some of these characters. I know that they aren't warm characters, so it is hard to sometimes get a connection to people who really do hold you at arm's length in a sense, but I still have formed an attachment to them. And so I love continuing on the story and getting to know some of these characters better. But this book took me a while to get into, and I don't know if it was the mindset I was in or if it was just that it was slow going in the beginning. And I don't mind slow books, but this was slow in the sense that I just had a hard time grasping what I wanted from it. And it makes me feel kind of bad because this had a lot of 5-star moments in it, but it wasn't really a 5-star read for me. And compared to the 5th season, which, you know, this is the continuation of the story. Obviously, you're still in the same situations and you have the same characters. There was so much earth-shattering moments, and I know that's kind of funny considering this book is about shattering the earth. But there were so many earth-shattering moments and things within the first book, and And in the first book, it felt like it was like every chapter, something huge happened. And granted, so many huge things happen in this book. It didn't quite have the same impact the first book did. And I know that you can't really take back the special element that made the first book really unique. And I don't say that I want you to be able to take that back, because I did like part of the perspective that you get in this book, which is unique from the first book. But that huge element that was important in the first book made it so special. And this one was really, really good, but it didn't have that same special 5-star quality for me. So I'm really excited to finish this series. The Broken Earth is the 3rd book, and I'm hoping to get to that at some point, but I don't know when it's going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen this year. I really love it though. 4.25, still really high, and maybe on a reread I would rate this higher. For me, it really was a bit of a slow start. So I hadn't initially intended for the Obelisk Gate to be part of the Magical Readathon. However, the book I had for prompt number 1 was The Mad Ship, which I am planning on reading within the beginning of this next month, but I didn't get to it quick enough for this readathon. And I was already reading The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, and I really wanted to finish that one because I've been holding off on that one for way, way too long. And my buddy read partner has already read it. So I decided to use The Obelisk Gate for the Novice Path entrance, which is to read a book with a map, because it has a map of the stillness, which is right here. So perfect. Book is finished. That first step in my novice path is done now. I felt bad for not doing it in order, but it's just the way this month worked out. Okay, so as far as October's going so far, I have not finished any books. I'm getting close to finishing the audiobook of Northanger Abbey, but like that's 70% or so. I am currently reading Mexican Gothic, but I've split that up among the months, so I'm a quarter of the way through that one, but I won't be finished with that one until the end of the month. And then I am so close, I'm like 85% of the way through with Mysteries of Hidalgo, and then I picked up Mad Ship again yesterday. I'm only about 150 pages into that though, so I didn't make too much progress. School is really, it's tough right now, and I'm behind and I'm stressing about it. I'm trying not to, I'm trying to just take it one day at a time, but there's just so much. There's so much. So my reading is not quite going the way I wanted it to starting out in October, but I'm gonna just keep pushing forward. That's all I can do. I don't want it to feel like a chore this month. I want school to feel like a chore. No, I'm just kidding. So I just wanted to update you on that. In some of my previous sum ups, I had mentioned that I wanted to catch up all my ratings and reviews for the books from May and June. And I'll talk about the next 4 books that I read in June, because I'd like to get through this June list and I'm just not getting closer. I won't talk too much about these books because, for one, my memory is horrible, and 2, I have vlogs where I talk about these books quite a bit. Like, I actually have quite a few vlogs from June. In fact, I have one that I'm still working on from June. It's just, it's not going well. It's not going well. So the 5th book that I read in June was Recipe for Persuasion by Sonali Dev. This is the second in the retellings that Sonali Dev is doing of Jane Austen. And so this one is Recipe for Persuasion, so obviously it's a retelling of Persuasion. I mean, Persuasion has been my favorite Jane Austen book so far, although of the 3 that I've read of Sonali Dev's books, this one was, I think, my least favorite. It was enjoyable, I really liked it, but I gave it a 3.75. Now this one is about Ashna Raje and this guy named Rico Silva. I really like Rico Silva. He's a famous football star, meaning soccer star, and he's injured himself, so he's trying to like reimagine himself by going on this celebrity show with real chefs, and they learn how to cook. It's a competition show, so obviously Rico is trying to win. But of course, the thing you should know, as is true for Persuasion, Ashna and Rico already know each other. And Rico's actually set up the situation intentionally to force Ashna's hand, make them talk to each other after many years of not conversing. It was cute, and I did enjoy it. There was a lot going on in this book, just like there was in the first book, just like there is in Jane Austen novels. But I felt like the first book worked a little better with that, the complexity. And the characters, especially Ashna, was not my favorite. I mean, I didn't dislike her, but she wasn't my favorite of the characters we've met, you know, of the love interest characters we've met so far. I thought that the romance in this was a little more desperate than the first book, which felt a little YA in a sense, actually. It felt a lot YA. And a part of that has to do with the romance starting when you're young, you know, and that desperation that you feel when you're so desperately in love with somebody. So I thought that was interesting. And of course, you know, when you have trauma or different things that happen in your life and you haven't quite emotionally moved past some of those things, that can cause a little bit of that desperate feeling as well. So just like with her other books, I thought there were really interesting conversations around mental health, as well as different commentary around race and identity. I do appreciate that Sonali Dev incorporates so much of these thoughts that she's having while she's writing and based off her own experiences into her books. I appreciate that. I think that if you really like Jane Austen, you should read this series in general. It's just so much fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun reimagining, but there is a lot of depth to these stories, which is what you find in Jane Austen. You know, Jane Austen's not just a romance writer. She has depth to the characters and a lot of social commentary. And so I really like that Sonali Dev is doing the same thing. She's including that social commentary. It's just more based in the current time period. The sixth book that I read in June is Medea by Euripedes. And I'm not going to talk about that here because I talk about it in depth in my Trash My TBR vlog. That one I gave 4.25. I thought that it holds up very well considering it was written in the 5th century BC. And I recommend if you read any of these older plays or even Shakespeare, listen to the audiobook or watch an actual play on YouTube or something like that, because it really adds to the experience. I loved watching this amazing Medea production after having read the play. It just brought everything to life. And then the 7th book that I read in June was Assassin's Quest. This is the 3rd book in the Farseer trilogy. This one I actually gave a 4.25. So this I think it might have been my least favorite of the Farseer trilogy. Felt like a middle book, and there was a lot of traveling when I felt like you didn't get anywhere, you know, like traveling to and fro, and then you start the traveling process again because you just didn't get where you needed to go. And so I struggled with that quite a bit. So it took me a long time. The ending, however, I thought was fantastic. I loved the ending. There were some really amazing parts of this, but I didn't feel like she utilized the characters as well as she had in previous books. Like, there were really important characters in this series that I felt like were left out of a good portion of this book that could have really made this story more enjoyable for me. 4.25 though, I still love Robin Hobb's writing. I still love her books. So this was absolutely enjoyable. Just not as enjoyable as Assassin's Apprentice, and of course, Real Assassin was my favorite. If you want to know more about this, Shell and I actually did a discussion. We talk a lot about it. It's completely spoiler filled, so if you haven't read it, I'd probably stay away from it. But go ahead and check that out. I will link it up here and down in the description box below. Finally, I'd like to talk about Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, because this is a 5-star book. It was interesting because I felt like I had already read this one before, and I couldn't have. So I was struggling a lot with that in the vlog. And if you would like to know more about this book, I talk about it a lot in my vlogs. So I will link all my vlogs, everything you need to know about these 4 books, I will link down in the description box below. It's one of those stories that deserves a 5 stars. I really liked the layout of it. It was very unique. It's a legacy story. One chapter is one sister, the other chapter is the other sister. Then the next chapter is the child of the first sister. And then the next chapter is the child of the second sister. And then you go the grandchild of the first sister, and then the grandchild of the second sister, and then the great-grandchild of the first sister, and then so it keeps going down like that through the generations. And really you're seeing a legacy of this African and African-American family and how they've been treated throughout history, challenges they have faced during slavery, during segregation, during Jim Crow. There are so many parts of history that you go through, and you're always seeing the hardships that are faced by these families because of racism. And not just racism in the US, but we also look at a racist system in Africa as well. So it was really interesting. I thought it was beautifully, beautifully done. The stories in the beginning were a little more compelling to me towards the end, but ultimately I still gave this book a 5 stars because I feel like it deserves it. The writing is gorgeous and I really like the formatting quite a bit. For a legacy story, this was very unique in my opinion, and I enjoyed that. I am hoping to have some books to be able to talk to you about next week, next Sunday Sum Up. I think I will at least have Northanger Abbey and maybe Mysteries of Udolpho. It'd be nice. We'll see, but I will give you an update either way because I still have books. I read a lot of books in June, so I still have more books to talk about for June and just give you a little bit of an update. I hope you guys are having a wonderful October so far and getting some spooky stuff done. I've got that pumpkin that I got at Joann's, so I mean, that's fun, right? I got a few other things. I just haven't really set them up yet. If you have any amazing books that you have started reading here in October, let me know in the comment section down below what you've read or what you're reading. I would love to hear what kind of spooky books you're getting into. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to help me out even more, consider clicking that subscribe button. It does. It helps me out. And you'll get to see more of my content. And hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.